Hey, I'm Claire O'Connor, and you're listening to the Strategic Authorpreneur podcast.
Hey there, strategic entrepreneurs. I'm Crystal Hunt.
And I'm Michela Mitrani. We are here to help you save time, money, and energy as you level up your writing career.
Welcome to episode 16 of the Strategic Authorpreneur podcast. Try saying that 3 times fast. On today's show, we're going to talk with special guest Claire O'Connor about accountability and developing your writing habits and things like that. But first, a brief update of what we have been tackling this past week in our own writing lives. What have you been up to, sir?
Believe it or not, I'm gonna say that I've been writing a lot and reading, which is something we're supposed to do as writers. But something that I want to share with you this week is not gonna be a book, so I'm gonna be doing things differently. I want to share with you something that really helped me a few years ago. It's an article by Hugh Howey, the science fiction writers, and the title of the article is "So You Want to Be a Writer." For the folks that are watching us from YouTube, I really hope you can see this. This is a handsome guy. That is Hugh Howey. And this is an article that I basically suggest to every single person that wants to write. It's very interesting because it's basically Hugh's perspective on why he was successful. He started as a self-publisher, and now he's doing basically hybrid kind of things. And there are 10 points that he points out that really made me think a lot about what I was doing as a writer, and why if you're really serious about what you're doing, you can really level up. But basically the core of the article is that you have to have a long-term plan. This is a marathon, as we always discussed about writing. It's not a sprint. And I really believe this article to be super, super interesting and useful for writers that are serious on the self-publishing route, but also on the legacy route. And it can be really refreshing in the way he explains things. And Hugo can be particularly funny when he writes. So yeah, this will be my resource. And for the rest, basically these past few weeks, I've been writing to keep up with my 12 by 20 challenge. So I'm now on the process of writing the 7th story. Own it, Michele, own it, 7th story. Okay. And I really hope that the people that are following me are going to enjoy it. But again, it's writing now. What have you been up to, Crystal?
Well, I am also transitioning back into the writing. So I have been digging back into my old fiction stories and things that I've written, and just trying to reorient myself firmly in my story world, which has been interesting. So on the creative side, generative side, that's what I've been doing, is just rereading the stories and organizing my cover files, organizing my character databases. As I reread the stories, I'm cross-checking them against the databases that I had created when I was working on them originally, and just making sure that, did I miss any supplementary characters? Is everyone's name in there? Sometimes I merge characters, or I switch them, or I give them a different role than I originally intended when I first sort of heard them talking in my head. And so then I have to make sure that my tracking stuff all matches up with what the reality of the published books are before I dive into the next book, because I don't want to weave them in an incorrect way or introduce continuity errors. So I've been working on a lot of that kind of cleanup and reprogramming my brain to be ready for that. And then on the business side, I've been working on kind of my next phase business plan for my fiction and how I want that reader journey to look. We've been talking a lot about reader journeys and the process of kind of bringing people into your story world with you. And so I've been working on just really getting into what is it that's going to make people stay with me in my story world and stick on my newsletter list and keep coming back to my websites. And there's 2 books that I have been reading, both actually by the same authors. One is called The Power of Moments by Dan and Chip Heath, and
Cover.
it's really interesting. It's exploring the stories of people who've created standout moments, from the owners who transformed an utterly mediocre hotel into one of the best loved destinations in LA, to the scrappy team that turned around one of the worst elementary schools in America. It's basically all these case studies about people who took something that wasn't working and made it into something that was amazing, and that people just fell in love with and keep coming back to. So I've read it before, and I'm just kind of rereading it with the filter of how can I apply that in my author business, and how can I create some of those really special moments for people as they're going through the onboarding for my website, and as they're going through downloading freebies, and me reaching out for the first time, and maybe even like as they have a tech support problem with, you know, getting a free book and I have to follow up, how can I transform that into a really positive experience? So that, in combination with this one, which is called Made to Stick, and it's the same authors, it's Dan and Chip Heath again, but it's breaking down ideas into kind of component parts, things like simplicity and unexpectedness, concreteness, credibility, emotional engagement, and stories, and how those can really work. And so, I mean, we want to be sticky. I think there's so much noise in the world right now, and there's so much information coming at us, and there's so many ideas and so many things happening, that it's really hard to really stand out in the crowd. And if you can really rock the psychological principles behind that engagement, then you use the tools in a smarter way. And, you know, we're talking about being strategic entrepreneurs. If you understand the people that are on the other side of your reaching out efforts, and your connect with readers efforts, and your marketing and your advertising, then your money's going to be better spent, and your ads will be more effective, and you will make actual real connections with the people on the other side of that. So I think both of those books are some of my favorites, and I'm just going through and kind of re-highlighting and making notes for myself of what inspirations come from that could be applied then to my newsletter overhaul that's about to happen, and the kind of re-engaging, re-onboarding process as I do a little bit of a shift in my fiction stuff that I'm doing. Yeah, that's what I've been up to. So all of that is in advance of a pretty intense phase of writing that's coming up. And so I think the timing is very good for both of us to talk to Claire O'Connor, who is an accountability coach for writers and other business people who are particularly creative businesses. And we will have a chat with her and then regroup and talk about what she had to say. Claire, welcome to the Strategic Authorpreneur podcast.
Thank you very much. I am good, thank you. I'm really happy to be here. Thank you for having me on.
Excellent. You're very
How
welcome.
Are you doing?
We're happy to have you here. I'm good. I'm excited to talk about accountability today.
Yes.
So,
well, I always am.
Yeah. Excellent. So maybe first, if you could tell us just a little bit about who you are and what you do, that might be a starting place for folks who did not get to chat with you in person before, as I have.
Yeah, for sure. So my name's Claire O'Connor. My my company is called The 5%. And basically I'm a qualified, trained professional life coach, and I work specifically as an accountability coach. I generally work with creatives and entrepreneurs and new business owners. And basically what I do as an accountability coach is I basically have them make progress, like help them make progress consistently on a goal or project that they're working on. Because I mean, I don't know if you found the same thing. I know that you're an entrepreneur and you've had lots of successful kind of company experience. But when you first start something, there's that excitement, and you're gripped by it, and you're like, this is amazing, I love this. And then as you carry on, the dip can happen, and you can start getting those anxieties and those doubts, and things get a bit tougher, and it can be really hard to keep going. And especially if you're doing it on your own, like especially as a writer or as an entrepreneur, you're generally working solo. So as an accountability coach, I kind of joke that I'm like their personal cheerleader, and I walk them through it. So we work through the obstacles together. I check in with them each week saying, what did you do last week? What do you plan to do the next week? So they have a clear plan for the week ahead of them. That's not like, one of the other things I do as well is we make sure people aren't working on like 300 tasks at once. I need to get 300 tasks done next week. that's not realistic. So I have them narrow down, like, what are the 3 to 5 tasks that are going to move you forward the most? And, what's going to move you forward the most? What can you realistically do? What's pushing you a little bit? So I work with people like that. And yeah, I love it. It's I'm really grateful to have the experience of helping people pursue their goals, basically.
Yeah, that is fantastic. What was it that brought you into doing this?
Good question. Yeah. So I'm not sure how much detail you want me to give, like how far back you want me to go. Essentially,
as far back as you want.
Yeah. When I was a small child, no, when I was in my 20s, I had no idea what career I wanted to do. I was really lost, and I moved from job to job, and I never really, felt like I'd found my thing, or my purpose, or my passion, whatever you want to call it. And then, so I decided at 30 to do some real like digging and diving, really to go deep and find a career for me. And I did lots and lots of research, lots of kind of self-questioning, read lots of resources, and I came across life coaching in this sort of like a real lightning bolt moment, where it's like, oh my goodness, yes, this is exactly what I've been looking for. This is where I'm meant to be. So I trained to be a life coach. It was still fantastic. I loved all the training. It really felt like right for me as a person. But after you've done your coach training, it's similar to being a writer, actually, that you can't just write about everything. Oh, sorry, you can. But sometimes most people like to sort of niche down and work on one particular thing. Or maybe you have an area that you love, like whether it's fiction or non-fiction or, romance or thrillers, whatever it is. And it's the same with coaching. It's really important to find a sort of niche, so you're not just coaching for everyone everywhere. So you can be really clear on what you're working on. So I was thinking about my niche, and then I'd started, just on the off chance, started working with an accountability coach of my own. And as I was working with him, I thought, I love doing this. Like, it feels very natural to me. And I thought, I can do what he's doing, and not only that, but it makes me really excited. I was like, this is what I do with my friends already. I'm always the person that's like, go you can do this. How can we make this happen? Like, let's just break it down and make it simple so you can do this. So that was one reason. And then I also started doing a kind of an accountability texting with a friend of mine to help me get up earlier in the morning. And it worked really well until we stopped the accountability. And still I stopped texting, until I stopped texting her. And then it basically, my habit fell by the wayside. So it really pinpointed to me how important accountability is and how useful it is at getting you to where you want to be. So it was those 2 reasons that made me go, this is my thing, I finally found it.
Your lightning bulb moment. That's great.
Yeah.
I love that you had this lightning bulb moment where you realized, okay, this is my thing. This is what I want to do. That's fantastic. Now, your website is called the 5%, right? And so I'm curious about where that 5% comes from and what it means.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I've had that question quite a lot. So I do try and explain to people, because I've had people say to me, the 5%, is that around like the richest 5% in the world? I'm like, oh, no. It's a much more, like, I think a much more awesome story than that. And basically the name came about because I was seeing my then massage therapist, who is fantastic and awesome. And I was chatting with her, as you do. And I was telling her about some of the life changes I was making when I was looking for my new career or my new purpose. And I was saying, so this is what I want to do. And these are the actions I've taken so far. Like, these are the steps I've taken. This is what I'm going to do in the future. And she said to me, it's so refreshing to hear someone talking about their goals and dreams and then talking about what they've done about it or what they're doing about it. And she said, like, so often people come in, especially for something like a massage, where you're relaxed, and they talk about all the things they want to do. And then they immediately give a reason why they can't do that thing. And she said, and the funny thing is that all the reasons are always the same. It's like, I have a mortgage, or, I have a partner, I have kids, I have pets, whatever it is. She said that people, they love talking about their goals and dreams and follow it up with the reasons why they can't do it. And she said, I would say that most people do that. It's probably only like 5% of people that actually talk about how they're going to make their goals and dreams happen. And so that's where it came from, where I was like, the 5%. Yeah. And that, obviously, that figure is not, scientifically proven or anything, of course not. But, and my, it's a bit tongue in cheek as well. The idea is that let's get away from that 5% of people kind of going after their goals and dreams and taking action, and let's flip it to 95%, 100% if possible.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is a big thing that people really, whether you believe you can or believe you can't, you're right. And, one of the big lessons I got from my mom, who's a smart lady, was that every single day, if you take one small step towards what you want to be true in your life, that you get there, right? It's that small incremental changes. And, you do a lot of work around habits, and you've done a lot of work in changing your own habits as well as helping other people change theirs. So I'm curious, can you talk about like a couple of the habits for yourself that you've switched over, and kind of how did you make that be a reality?
Yeah, for sure. And two that I can think of, and one is it's not necessarily random, but it's an important one. But I remember starting the habit of flossing, which I'd been trying to do for probably years, I'd say, and I would always be like, oh, it's so boring. It takes so long. I mean, it really doesn't, So with that, I found it really helpful to partner it up with something. So as an example, I always floss straight after I've done my teeth, and I do it in the evening. And the more you do that, it becomes like you don't even think about it anymore, and especially I'm the sort of person that works well in pairs, and I kind of associate things together very well. So for example, when I've had a shower, I put on my deodorant, and it's like those two things are coupled together. So for me, it was like I do my teeth, and then straight afterwards I floss as well. And the other thing which has been really helpful is that my partner was also starting to floss as well. So we had that accountability again, where it was, and you almost make it into a challenge or a competition where you're like, oh, he's just flossed. Well, then I have to floss because I'm not going to be the one that didn't floss,
Yeah.
So that's one habit it hasn't necessarily changed my life. Like, I don't feel necessarily different, but I think it's one of those good life habits that it's useful to have. And I'm trying to think of another habit that would be great to share with you. I think probably getting up early for me, or rather getting up at 7 a.m. because I am not a morning person. It takes me a while to get going in the morning. And especially when we have a small child, we have a toddler. And if he's been up in the night, it can be quite a challenge to get out of bed. But that's my best working time. So I knew I needed to get started on getting out of bed at a particular time. Like I said, this is when I started text accountability with my friend. So I would get out of bed in the morning and I would shoot her a text straight away and say, okay, I'm up, I'm out of bed. And obviously the rule was no jumping back into bed, no.
Yeah.
And that for me, having that external accountability really helped. And then I've been working with a friend who, luckily as a coach, you have lots of friends who are coaches. So I was working with a friend and she was saying to me, okay, let's take that further. Now you're not texting your friend anymore. How can we make that, how can we keep that going? And so I'd put in, now I have an exciting thing to get up for in the morning. So I jump out of bed, I grab a coffee and I go straight to my desk and I start working. And for me, that's writing. And that's when I have lots of creative ideas. And it's normally when the baby's asleep as well. So it's like double, it's a double win. It's like it's me time. I've got my coffee. I don't need to think about what I'm doing in the morning. So that's been really important as well, is it becoming not something you need to think about, something that becomes instant. And it's the same as if you're working out or if you're trying to write, take the thought out of it, make it inviting. So I don't know, go to the gym with a friend or have your favorite mug or a really inspiring place that you write. And yeah, fearless. I love it. I have actually have a similar mug to that, I think it's the Ray Dunn ones, and one says hello, and that's my morning one. And then I have a sunshine one as well. Nice. Those two are my special mug.
Yeah. It's amazing how the small things can make such a big difference and add up over time. And I'm a health psychologist by background, so I've done a lot of learning about sort of life hacks and how do you change behavior and all of those things. And it is those small consistencies. There's so much research that supports that 100% is easy. If there's something that you just always do, then it's no longer thought or a decision. It just is, and it becomes an automated part of your routine. And that's where you get really powerful results over time, is when those things start stacking up. And so you don't try to change everything at once, right? It's just adding in one habit at a time, and then layering things in one at a time. As you talked about earlier, like not having too many things on the go is really, really important. And so when we're thinking about some of these other health habits and some other things that you can change in your life, it may not always be obvious how that relates to sort of building a career as a writer or as a person who is an entrepreneur. And for most writers, that's a combination of both things. We are both of those things. So maybe you could talk a little bit about, like, what are some of the challenges that you see writers have in terms of moving things forward? Like, what are some consistent issues that come up for your coaching clients?
Oh my goodness, there's many. And I also, the good thing as well is that I share a lot of these struggles, because I do writing as well. Like, I'm a coach, but I have my own blog, and writing has always been a passion of mine. So I totally get so many of these struggles. And for me, I think a big one is going to be about motivation, like getting to write, but also keeping that motivation going day after day, or week after week, however often you write. Sometimes you might have a creative spell of maybe a week or even a month, and you think, fantastic, I'm on fire, I'm going. And then when it dries up, that's the really tough point, is keeping it going consistently. So again, like we've talked about, those, to get through that and to keep going day by day, it's like knowing that small things add up. So if you only have 5 minutes to work on your novel or whatever it is, like, that is better than nothing. And if you keep doing those 5-minute increments, or even writing one paragraph or writing one line, it doesn't sound like much, but those things all add up. And I joke with my clients and I say, that is all a book is. It's a book is chapters broken down into paragraphs, broken down into sentences. Like, that's it. And so you can write a sentence, and then if you can do a few sentences, you've done a paragraph. If you've done a few paragraphs, or more than a few, but you've done a chapter, and building up that way, like we said. And I think for another one, which I'm sure people would struggle with, and I do too, is like actually having those ideas. And sometimes you might, create the best space, like you have your inspiring place that you write, and you've dedicated some time, or you've, got up early, and you have this block of time. And then you have a block on what to actually write about. Like, you're sitting there with a cursor flashing and thinking, something will come to me, something must come to me. And then it's that really scary feeling of, well, what if it doesn't? I'm wasting my time. And, I have this time blocked off, and you can really get in your head about it. So for me, space has been a huge factor for that. And I mean, like, space in terms of physical space, like disconnecting from the world, being outside, being out in nature, whatever it is, being away from people, if that's your thing. And also rest in terms of giving your head some space, giving your brain some space, and physically making sure that you take time off as well as having time on. And that's when I've had my most creative ideas, is when I've done nothing, or I've been, out for a walk, and I come home and I'm like, oh, I have 3 blog ideas, like, that are just pouring out of me. So yeah, I'd say those are 2 of the biggest ones. And know as well that it doesn't need to be a solo activity, like getting accountability and support from wherever you can, like whether that's joining there's tons of apps now for accountability, whether it's joining a forum, like a writers forum, where you support each other and you post every week or every day, getting any external accountability you can. And actually there's a great website or tool called Focusmate. Have you heard of that one? Have you heard of Focusmate?
Focusmate? No.
Yeah, essentially you sign in and you team up with somebody that you don't know somewhere in the world, and you basically have a block of time, I think it's an hour, and you have 50 minutes to work on your thing, and you meet each other at the start on video, you say hi, you share what you're going to work on, and then you don't talk to each other anymore. You do your block of work for 50 minutes, and then you both check in at the end and see how you got on. And it's fantastic because cool. So it's no chit chat. You keep the video on so that you're still accountable, so that the person can see, like, hey, I see you playing games, or I see you taking a nap. And some people that won't work for, because we all have like different preferences, but some of my clients have found that so great. And then they've got it scheduled in their calendar. Like, I have 3 Focusmate blocks this week that I know I'm going to get things done in. Yeah. And going on from that point made me think as well that it's, for me, a big part is knowing what works for you and trying things out, and being okay with failing. And because there are lots of accountability or lots of tools we can use, and they might not all work for you, and that's okay, and it's taken me a while to find out what works for me, and I'm still learning and I'm still enjoying it. So it's a big part of like allowing yourself to fail and then picking yourself back up again and then trying something else, because then when you find that thing, it's great. You're like, this works for me.
Button. Yeah. And I think that's a really important part of the process. Is it's easy. It's actually called the what the hell effect in psychology, is when you've like broken a promise to yourself, and then you basically say, well, what the hell, and then I won't even bother, and you give up because you've had what you consider a failure. And instead, if you hit the reset button and give yourself that fresh start, then you can start your new chain, or however it is you're tracking things, and just kind of look to challenge your personal best. That's always my personal goal is, okay, well, the last, I made it through 5 days or whatever it was of writing in a row. Okay, well, hit the reset button. My goal is now to beat 5 days. So it's not that you're focused on every day, you're just focused on making the next string longer than the string before it. And then that just lets you build from wherever you actually are, as opposed to trying to build on some ideal of what a perfect you would be doing, which of course we know is not a thing. The perfect us's are, alas, a little bit lacking in this current world.
Yeah. It's okay not to be perfect. Yeah. You raised so many good points there, and I love the what the hell, because it happens so many times. Like you're on a diet or you're eating really healthily, and then you have one evening where you eat terribly, you're eating junk food or you stuff your face with cookies, and you think, well, there's no point in continuing. But there so is, because you already have done all that work and you can build on it now. So you're exactly right. Like, you're looking at, okay, if I did 5 days, what can I do that would improve on that? And again, I love that, because you're comparing yourself to your past and not to someone else, which is such a big thing as well. Like hearing if someone else has just had their first novel published, or if someone else has managed to write 3 chapters and you've only written, I don't know, for 3 days straight, if that's still a win for you, like treasure that win, because we're all on our own journey, we're all on our own path, right?
I think there's a lot of value in remembering to compare ourselves to ourselves, because it is too easy to be like, oh, well, so-and-so, did X, Y, and Z. And so one of the things we have in the Creative Academy, which is our online community that myself and Donna Barker and Eileen Cook founded a while back. So we do have sprints on an ongoing basis, and they're like a standing date where people can show up and all write together in the Zoom room. So it's similar to the accountability app, but there's a whole bunch of people, and so that somebody will be in there at 7:30 a.m. every day, and so you can show up when you can show up and not when you don't. And there's no like, oh, hey, like so-and-so I didn't see you around the sprints this morning. Just a little bit, because sometimes we'll be like, oh, we missed you, we'll look forward to when you can join us next time. And so I think there's like, as an accountability partner, it's really important to know like how the other person operates. So I'm curious for you, if you're working with clients, how do you know if they're a carrot or a stick person? How does that work? And
such a good question. And that is something that definitely, when I start with clients, those sort of things are really important to know, and there's no way you can know without chatting with someone. So my honest answer is, I ask people and I encourage them to keep checking in with who they are, and be okay with testing things out, and be okay with like changes. You don't have to be a certain way, like if you're a night owl person and everyone else is morning people, it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. Just tweak your environment and do what you can with it. So for my clients, really it's just a question of asking them, like, and I start off with quite I'd say a moderate balance of friendly checking in, and that little bit of pressure, but also that caring attitude, and I see which way they need to fall, and generally I keep checking in with them, like, if you need me to be harder on you, I will be. Like I've had clients where I've sent them a text every day, just to get them, when they've been through a difficult week, just to have them moving again, and then saying to them, do you still need me to do that, or should we ease off a bit? So it's a question of really checking in with people, and then having them check in with themselves, because we know ourselves best as well, and to be honest, for example, with your sprints, which are fantastic, deep down if you are making excuses for not joining one, or if you're genuinely busy,
Yeah.
If you're being afraid of writing, say something that's putting you off from writing is that you're feeling fearful, if that reason is, genuine, or if it's something you could look into and be like, so what am I really afraid of here? Maybe I'm afraid of success, which is quite a valid fear. Okay, let's look into that then. Let's talk about that with people, right? Because you're not going to be the only person going through it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's some really interesting stuff, because we do sort of assume that other people think the same way we do. And so when we're going to work with someone else, whether it's a professional coach or whether you have an accountability buddy that you found through your writing network or whatever, I think the default is to think that whatever would help you is what would help them. And that's really not in fact the case. So I think it is really important. It's not that you have to be paired up with somebody who thinks just like you do and likes things the same way you do, but like you said, you have to ask them, and you have to understand. Like, I completely rebel if somebody says to me, like, you have to do this, I am immediately out. I just am not interested. When I was a kid, as long as my parents didn't ask me if I had homework, my homework was done. But the second, even if I was like literally had my books in hand and was about to go sit at the table to do my homework, if they said you should do your homework, I was done. Like, I was not doing it. And so that, alas, is a consistent character trait.
Have you heard of the four tendencies?
Yeah. I'm not a pure rebel. I am a rebel and obliger, actually. So if I make an external commitment to somebody else, like I say, okay, for the next week, I'm going to show up at sprints at 7:30 in the morning, then I will show up because I promised someone else, and the obliger part of me says, yes, you're going to do this. And then because I chose it, it's a little bit easier to get around that rebel part, but you have to be aware enough of yourself. And when stuff isn't working, if you can identify why it's not working, that makes it easier to change whatever you need to change in your environment to support that too. So I think that's really helpful for people to remember.
Definitely.
You have developed some freebie kind of helper things that I noticed on your website. So maybe can you tell our listeners a little bit about what they might be able to find there and what your website is too?
Sure. Yeah, of course. So my website is the5%.net, and that's all spelled out. So the, and then 5 as a word, and then percent as a word, .net. And one of the freebies that I think would be great, especially for writers, is I have a workbook on 10 ways to drastically increase your chance of success. And it's like a super fun workbook. It won't take long. You can just print it out, or even do it online. Print it out, have a look through, and it's 10 factors that can help you like massively improve your chances of success. And there are some of the things we've talked about here, like who can be in your support group. But for a lot of people, and especially these days, while a lot of people are working from home, you might not have access to a support group. So one of the other things is, one of the examples in the workbook is like looking for people around you who inspire you, and like following what they're doing as well. We don't have to know someone personally to still learn from them, or what's the word, like not necessarily copy them, but I'm trying to think of the words, like sort of use them as that's the word. Not copy exactly. Like take on their embody, I suppose, what they really represent. And that's such a thing as well that I think is really important for a writer. Can be I suppose not owning up to that identity as a writer, but acknowledging it, embracing it, I think is the word I'm looking for. Like really embracing that identity, because if you're scared to tell people you're a writer, if you're scared to admit to yourself you're a writer, that could be a stumbling block for you, So I sometimes joke with my clients, and I say, if you're, say, I don't know, like an engineer or a hairdresser or anything, or a pilot, and you're wanting to be a writer and you're doing a bit of writing in your spare time, when you meet people, you might say to them, oh, I'm an engineer, but I am interested in writing, or, I'm an engineer, but I have a little side hobby of writing. Like, I think it's perfectly okay to flip that round and say, I'm a writer, and I do a bit of engineering while I'm, on the side, while I'm waiting for my novel to get published, or whatever it is, So like fully embracing those writer qualities. And then you can look at other writers and say, well, what would they do in this situation? Like how would, if they were in this particular, if they were having this stumbling block or this obstacle, how would they approach it?
Yeah,
So
that's
yeah,
really
definitely check out the website, check out the freebies, and yeah, and I'll definitely, like, because I write myself and I know the struggles that come from it, there'll definitely be I do lots of future blog posts and lots of blog posts about like how you can keep that motivation going. And sometimes you have that thought of, why am I doing this? And you need that reminder of like, this is important. Like it's, something wants to come out of you, and that's really precious.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think something really interesting comes up there, which is when we're talking about motivation and we're talking about, carrot versus stick and following your passion and all of these things, there's some really interesting thoughts to be had about why are you resistant? And when you start looking at, okay, are you a writer in the sense that you are compelled to write things? Or are you passionate about your subject and writing is the medium you need to use to communicate with people about that subject? Because I think those are very different kinds of creatives and the challenges you're going to face. Like if writing is not a very comfortable medium for you, but it's what you need to do to get your message, whether it's you're writing a book about your subject matter, expert area, or whether you are writing blog posts to share what you know with people, or if you're writing a novel because you have a story that you really think needs to be told and people need to be able to access, those are completely different experiences with different potential blockages or sources of fear or stumbling blocks. So I think there's some interesting just things to think about in terms of, for your own self out there, listeners, what is it that is stopping you from showing up at your desk? Is it that writing is actually not your medium? Because then things like dictation or, video, maybe it's not actually a book you need to be writing. Maybe you want to be video blogging. Maybe you want to be doing something else. And I'm sure you see this in your clients, but if you are lit up about something, you shouldn't need strategies to motivate you to do it. It should be the thing that you wake up excited to do. Just like you said at the beginning of this episode, once you've figured out what you were passionate about doing, getting up early to go to work is the reward, right? And so if you feel like what you're motivating yourself to do is punishment or like not a good experience, you need to look at what you're not enjoying about that process, because forcing yourself to do stuff you don't want to do isn't the way to get you to your passion. And you're going to see diminished returns and you're going to not want to keep going. You don't have the inherent reinforcement in that you need if that's the case.
100%. Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. And when you were talking at the beginning, I was like nodding my head so much and thinking, I so agree, because you're right that writing might not be your medium. And I have met so many people who say, like, oh, I need to I need to write a blog, I need to start a blog, or I need to be on social media. And you can tell from their, their physical being as well, that they don't want to do it. There's something they'd rather be doing. Perhaps that, like you say, perhaps they're great on video, or perhaps that doing an audiobook would be fantastic, whatever it is. But yeah, I'd say to people as well in that instance, think about your reader as well, or the person at the end, and think about the energy you're bringing to them. If you sit down and you're forcing yourself to write day in, day out, you'll think about what you're bringing, what's going to be on the page is going to be kind of, it comes across somehow, like I don't want to be here, very flat. Yeah. Whereas you can hear when you're talking to somebody, if they love doing video, you can see the people that love, doing their YouTube channels or their podcasts.
Yeah.
Like, you can see for you, you're smiling, you can hear it in your voice. Right. But yeah, I think life's too short to do something that you really don't want to do. And of course we all have days where we're losing motivation. It's not about having one day of feeling a bit bad and giving up. Yeah. But it's saying, if you consistently know that writing isn't your medium, if you're consistently, like you say, stopping yourself from doing it, find something else then. And we live in an age where there are so many things that we can do, which is fantastic.
Yeah. There's more options than ever before as far as communicating with your audience and getting things out there. I have an 80-20 rule for myself that if I wake up more than 2 mornings out of 10 and I don't want to do the thing I'm supposed to be doing that day, then I have to make a change. Because that just means there's something that needs to be adjusted. And it doesn't mean you have to necessarily quit your job, or you have to, give up on the book you're writing or whatever. It just means something's got to shift. So is it the time of day you're doing certain things? Is it like your own mental story about that thing? Like if I say, oh, I have to do this versus I get to do this, it's a completely different bodily experience. So the language you use in your self-talk makes a massive amount of difference. So
Yeah.
I think that's something that we don't realize how powerful we are in our own heads. And that ultimately, like, we're writers, we are the author of our own stories internally and externally. So I think that's a really interesting opportunity. And I'm curious, have you ever had to have the conversation with somebody where you're like, I will hold you accountable, but are you sure you want to do this?
I totally have. Yeah. And I don't want to get too personal with my clients, but I have had that experience where, and even like I actually do email accountability, which is great for introverts. I do email and text accountability. So for my 6-month accountability program, I check in with people on email each week. And the idea is that they don't spend long on the email. They don't have videos to watch. They don't have conference calls. We cut all of that out. So they're literally just focusing on their tasks. But it's funny that even through email, I can tell when their passion is wavering. I can tell when they're forcing themselves. I mean, of course, I kind of joke with my clients that I don't know if you're in the bath when you write your email. I don't know if you're wearing your pajamas. I don't care if it's 4 a.m, but I can tell their level of, I suppose, commitment and level of passion. And I actually have a questionnaire that I do with my clients when I've been working with them for a while. And I say, like, I've guessed your commitment and your passion. Can you let me know what it is out of 10? And they rate themselves out of a scale of 1 to 10. And normally I'm pretty spot on, nice. So yeah, even on email, you can tell whether there is that spark there and that passion. Yeah. And what else? There were 2 other things you brought up that I was nodding my head in emphatically. There were 2 things I was going to say. One was that as writers as well, we know already that language is so important. So when you said about watching the language we use, I think, that's a fantastic practice as a writer as well, because like you say, I have to, it kind of has that feeling of obligation, whereas I get to, or I dare to, so think about the words that really work for you. And going on from that, one word that never works for me, and I wish we could ban, is the word should. Like, I hate that word. As soon as I hear someone using the word I should, I know that there's a disconnect. I know that they're going down a path that probably isn't meant for them. So if you find yourself saying that, like, I should be writing today, why should you? Because you want to, or because you feel you have to, or like, language is massively powerful, and how we talk to ourselves. I mean, I could probably talk about that for another 2 hours, so I'll hold off. But I will say in a summary that, yes, be aware of, like, this here is incredibly powerful, and you don't just have to listen to your inner critic. You can combat that with a caring, I call it like the fairy godmother person in your head. Like, when your inner critic is saying, what you've written is terrible, you can counteract that with your fairy godmother saying, how do we know that? Who are you to judge? Why don't you let your readers decide that? Like, let's come back and look at it in half an hour or a couple of days or something, and let's not be so hard on ourselves, right?
Absolutely. I developed this thing I use with my clients a lot when I was doing cognitive behavioral therapy, and it was, I call it stop, drop, and roll. So it's like the fire, what you learned in school, that, if you catch on fire, you stop, you drop to the ground, and then you roll over because you're trying to, like, put it all out, right? But it works with your thoughts too. If you have a persistent thought, you can like picture yourself, just freeze the thought, drop it, and then flip it over and reframe it. So if the thought is, I can't do this, I'm stuck, then you freeze it, you drop it, you flip it over, and you write in your journal and you say out loud, and you try to phrase it in the positive. So, I can write 1 paragraph today, or you can start with, I am not stuck, I can do the thing. So sometimes it does take that connecting sentence of, okay, your brain thinks you can't. So you can use the words your brain is using, but you add a word to make it positive. So, I can do the thing, and then what you will do, or what you are doing. Stating it in the present also helps sometimes. So I am writing this paragraph.
I'm doing it
right now.
This is happening. This is it's going to happen. It is happening. It has all of that. And I love that you did CBT, or cognitive behavioral therapy. I think it's massively important, and I think everyone could help themselves by learning about it. And I actually had a similar exercise I used to do in workshops, which is very similar to what you were saying, flipping a sentence from negative to positive. And I used to call it adding a but. And essentially I'd have people write down a thought that they were having about themselves or their work, like, I don't know, my writing is stupid, or whatever your thoughts are. And then I would have them add a comma and write in big letters, but, and then I would have them finish the sentence afterwards. And I do it on myself sometimes as well. I find myself thinking, I don't know, I might think, oh, this blog post, I think, this blog post isn't that great. And then I'd say to myself, let's add a but. This blog post isn't that great, but I can work on it some more. I will edit it tomorrow when I'm feeling fresh. But why don't I let my readers decide that? Because quite often, we are the harshest critics. And so often I've sent out a piece of writing that I think, I'm not sure how this is going to resonate. And I've got a really good response back from it. People saying, thank you so much for this. I needed this. So remember that you're probably your harshest critic. And add that but, reframe in the positive. Yeah.
Absolutely. All caps, comma, B-U-T,
oh, yeah.
the end of any negative sentence.
Yeah.
There you go, listeners. You have two options of how you can change those thoughts. Super easy to hand, and we didn't charge you a penny for that professional advice. So you are doing well.
Free but.
Okay, so now we have something really important to talk about because I'm noticing the time, and there's something that we really need to discuss. Very serious. Whiskey bacon donuts.
Oh yes.
So okay,
yeah, of course. I'm glad you saved this till the end because we don't want any kind of mass hysteria or fainting at the thought of whiskey bacon donuts. Yep.
Yes. So let's talk about that for a second. I know of one source in particular in Vancouver where one can acquire those. I'm curious where you get yours.
So mine are cartons.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, it has to be.
Right, there you go.
And also, I love cartons as an inspiring place as well. Like cartons, I think they set up with 1 or 2 donut shops, and they just have done everything so well. So they're expanding, but they're still keeping that community vibe, and they've still, like, for me, I just see it as such an inspiring success story. And they do great donuts. I'm sorry, I was interrupting you.
I was going to say, for fellow celiacs out there, Cartons has gluten-free donuts. And I had not had a donut in like 20 years. And then my cousin said, I found this place, you have to come. So we checked it out and it was fantastic. So we will put a link in the show notes if anyone is around Vancouver. Then if you need a whiskey bacon donut, that is your place to go.
I think so. And I think they also, I don't work for Cartons, I must say, although I probably should be on commission, but they do a free donut on your birthday. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but they do more than one choice for celiacs and gluten-free. Is that right?
Yes, they have actual flavor options. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not like the gluten-free and you're like, oh, the donut at the end. It's like they actually have thought of these things and they cater for lots of people. And I guess we can link to that saying, like, know what keeps you going. Use that reward system as well if it works for you. Like, I would not recommend having a whiskey bacon donut every day, but at the end of a long week,
your finish the book reward.
Yeah. Oh, finish the book is a little extra than whiskey bacon donuts. We're talking, we're talking a glass of something as well, or whatever it is. But definitely.
All right. Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Claire. We will put all of the links to the things we talked about and the great resources you mentioned into the show notes. So be sure to check there. And I just want to say thank you so much for coming out and sharing your tips, your knowledge, and all of that good stuff with us today.
Not at all. Thank you so much. Yeah, I really enjoyed chatting with you. So thank you very much. And I will look forward to connecting with you again soon in some way.
Okay, we watched the amazing talk within Crystal and Claire. There are a couple of things that I really loved that she said. And I would like to spend a few minutes on these 2 points. There was one thing that she said at the beginning about change and choices that I think that it's remarkable and it's important for writers too. She was saying at 30, she decided to, let's say, dig a bit deeper and to find what she really wanted to do with her life. And so the story is that she started with accountability partner via text messages with a friend. And I found this really interesting and useful, because it's like an approach that we as writers can use on our everyday agenda. So she gave me a very interesting point to explore, which is like sometimes we are not enough. We need help from the outside world. It can be a friend with text messages. It can be, as I said in previous episode, Crystal kicking my butt if I have a deadline to meet, writing wise. It can be an app. She gave an interesting suggestion on that front. We're going to put the link on the show notes for that. It can be anything you want, but sometimes we just have to recognize there are other people out there in the world that somebody have put to help us. We need to use them. And I think like once you give yourself the freedom to understand that you are not alone in your writing journey, in your authorpreneur journey, whatever is the journey you're in, you're going to rock it. You're going to kill it. Because you know that you are more of a part of a team. You're not a lone wolf. And there is no problem if you like the idea of being a lone wolf. But if you are a strategic lone wolf, you're going to get the help of the people you need. Same thing if you are, for example, an indie author, you need help with the cover if you can't design your own cover. You need help with the editor. You need help with if you need somebody kicking your butt again, with a partner that is telling you need to do this by this day. This is the important point that I really wanted to underline, that Claire said, and that I think it's very useful for all of us to understand. Sometimes we are just not enough. It's okay to ask help to other people. And then between the many interesting things she said, another of the point that she mentioned was about space, physical space.
Ooh, can we pause? Can we go back, because I want to talk about that first thing before we go away from it. That's okay.
I was just going in.
You're on a mission. There are 2 points. We're gonna make them.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
okay.
And one second. And Crystal, I'm wondering, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I really like the idea that anytime you can make that change, that, you know, some of my favorite authors that I've worked with have been in their 80s, the first book that they had published. And I love that. And there's also, we get kids who are like 10 years old who are approaching us at conferences or at Creative Academy, and they're ready to make a book. And I spent many years teaching the Creative Writing for Children Society and mentoring kids who are writing their first books, and because they're part of this program, they actually were publishing their first books at age 10 or 11, and you know, they were learning all the things of how to be an author and what that life looks like, and learning how to follow through a project to the end. And I really just love that there is really no age and there's no requirements to be a writer in the same way that there are for a lot of other careers. You really can, you know, maybe you can't use your hands, so you dictate. Maybe, you know, you don't have to be able to get up and walk around. I feel like the accessibility in being a writer is quite high with all the technologies that we have available to us and the different ways of telling a story. So that is very cool. And I think there are so many opportunities to overcome whatever our limitations are, whether they are visible or not visible. Often the things are on the inside, but because there's no one right way to tell a story, that we can pick our formats and pick our methods and pick our genres and our characters to suit whatever our lifestyle looks like and our capabilities look like. So I just think that's a really neat piece of the storytelling life is, yes, absolutely, dial in help from anyone and anything around you that will help get you to where you want to be. I think we do have a lot of options for that, and it's very exciting right now, especially to see all of the advancements in the way technology is working and all of the options that we really have for accessing our readers directly and getting those stories out there into the world in whatever way works for us is very cool.
Yeah. And I think like when she mentioned the app, like you can be like shy and you can be in your pajama, but that's basically not an excuse. Like with the resources we have today, the instruments we have today, the tools we have today, anybody can use that. You don't necessarily have to be like, for example, Creator Academy sprints. That's something else that we can mention. Like, you just have to be part of a community of people that want to do the same thing, and then can be a writing sprint, can be an accountability partner. It doesn't matter. It's your will. That's the only thing that really matters. And there was another thing that Claire said that I think it's important to mention, or at least it resonated with me, if I can talk today. And it was the importance that she had with the space and with the rest. Space, I mean physical space, and rest, like sleeping, getting to sleep. It is something that I actually notice on my day-to-day schedule. If I don't get enough rest, I'm not able to produce as nearly as a good content as I can if I'm resting, for example. And sometimes I just do this. I try to convince myself that I don't need that much rest, which is bad. And I know a lot of people doing that. Some people need like 6 hours of sleep per day, Arnold Schwarzenegger, okay? But some other might need like 7 or 8. I know people that need 10 to 11. We're not going to do name here, making any names. But yes, you need that rest, Crystal. You need to be able to recharge your body in whatever way you think is best for you. And the other thing is that the space. Physical space means where. Ask yourself this question: where do you usually sit if you write sitting when you're going to write? Look around. What is like the writing space? There is something interesting that has been said before by Steven Pressfield, the author of The World of Art, and he was like, there was a moment in my life that I was doing writing, and I lived in my car. Like, he lived in a car, and the car like had like everything in it, like dresses, like shoes, any stuff. Any single time he had to write, he had to undig the machine. How do you call the machine?
The typewriter.
The typewriter. Yes, thank you for that. And dig that out of like soaks and stuff, anyways, and write. And then he was like, this is no way to welcome the muse, using his own words. And I think like it's something similar to what she's been saying in the interview. Like, you need space, you need peace of mind, and I don't care if you write the best in like a disorganized mayhem kind of space, then so be it. But you have to understand what it is that works for you and it doesn't. For me, for example, Crystal, it works like usually I can be in a coffee shop, but it needs to be in the morning. If it's not in the morning, I'm going to have some problems. It needs to be usually like a surface that does only have my notebook, my pen, and my MacBook. That's it. And I'm curious to know, like, if you have some similarities with me, or if you do both for the resting part and for the the writing space part. It's something similar, or it's something completely different. What do you do?
I am very, very guarded about my sleep. So I make very sure that I get enough sleep every night. Very occasionally that doesn't happen, but that is the way that I get so much done. The rest of the time is I sleep 8 hours, a bare minimum for sure. And if things have been really crazy, then it's probably more like 10. And that's just what I need to run my brain at the capacity that it runs at. And I spend most of the hours in the day in taking information and learning things and processing things and creating things. And I don't do a ton of what I call passive downtime. Even if I'm watching Netflix, it's usually I'm choosing shows that are related to the genre I'm writing in, and I'm kind of breaking down like which of these characters are pulling me in and why. And I don't count it as work because I love it and it's what I think is fun. And so it's not like I feel overburdened like I'm working all the time. It's just that that's what I'm passionate about and excited about and what lights me up. And so it generates energy, but it burns a lot of energy at the same time. When you are really passionate about what you're doing, it requires a lot of feeding that in terms of fresh air and in terms of that sleep has to happen. I can feel the processing speed in my brain lower if I didn't get enough sleep. And I can feel that my body hurts quicker and that things don't do what they're supposed to. And so for me, that's kind of my number one priority is protecting the hours that I'm asleep and making sure the environment I'm sleeping in doesn't have any other things, and that that's something that I can do. Obviously, there are times when that doesn't work perfectly. Lately there's been some strange dreams and some just weird mental processing going on with the state of the world. And so, you have to make allowances. And so that means I might have to make a couple hours in the afternoon to get some more sleep then if I couldn't get it in the night. And so I tend to just not focus on, if it's not working, I will just get up and do something. And then I'll go back to bed, and then I'll just adjust my schedule because I do have the freedom to do that. So that is one advantage of living the author's life in a very full way, is that you can adjust your schedule as you need to around other appointments and presentations and things like that. So I think just giving yourself permission to do that is important, because when your brain is your tool, you can't always control when and how it's going to work. Sometimes the story idea will come late at night, and then you're suddenly very inspired and you want to just act on that. And so habits and routines are great as a backup structure, but I think you do have to be willing, if something kind of hits you, to act on it then, or you do sometimes lose that momentum that you could have had. So
what about the space? Usually you write in that office a lot. I think we spoke about this before, and you told me when you were at the beginning, you start and you wrote 3 books in like a coffee shops, but I didn't know that shift, right? Tell me a bit more about that.
Yeah, I'm easily distracted. So coffee shops are hard for me. The coffee shop worked great when we actually are, if our daughter was living with us and we had a small apartment, and if concentrating at home is hard, then a coffee shop can be a good alternative. My preference is actually writing not completely alone. I write really well if my husband is in the house with me, but not in the same room and not talking to me. But he will be working on his own creative project in one area, and I will be like sitting on the couch or whatever, and he'll be on the chair. We'll both be on separate laptops. We both have headphones on. We can't hear each other, but it's just like a nice energy, and then it feels not so isolated. So that actually works really well. For me, it isn't necessarily the physical space. It's that I put rain sounds on the headphones, or I put one song on repeat. We talked about this a bit when we talked about our work from home episode. So, there's a little bit of repeat there, but it is very much about, I use a keyboard, a separate keyboard that is not attached to my computer and does not have the internet. And I just slip my phone in it, or the small iPad, so that I can't see very much. It's just the words on the page, and then I go nuts there. So it just depends what stage of the writing process, really. But yeah.
I like
Curious
the way you
Jar
clear
has
your
made
throat.
an appearance. Serious business is happening here. Okay, so the Curious Jar is back. It is filled with questions. You can see the shiny papers if you're watching us on YouTube. All different colors like a rainbow, because that makes me happy, much like my highlighter collection. I'm going to dig around in here. Tell me when to stop.
Go. Stop now. Now.
Yellow.
Yellow. We never had a yellow, I think.
Yeah. Okay.
Bracing myself.
Okay.
That's like
Brace yourself, indeed.
Wicked smile.
Okay. What are some of the jobs you've had while you were building your writing career, and how did they help you become the writer you are today?
Oh, I can answer to this in a second.
Do it. Dive in.
Okay. So I worked as the name of the project assistant for a company based in Vancouver, a language-based company. Basically, what they did was like translation of things from one language to the others, and they did this kind of project and stuff. And so what I get to do was I got to meet a lot of people that spoke different languages. So people from Mexico, Italy, France, Quebec friends, friends from Europe, US, Canada, Germany, Austria. Yeah, anyways, a lot of them. And one of the policy of this job was like that you had to be very welcoming, because like the environment that they were in was a bit weird. It was different, and so when I greeted people from different culture, one thing that I learned and that I believe I internalize and I apply then on my books and sometimes on characters is that every single one of them, people from different parts of the world, will have a different expectation on the project they were about to undergo with me. Because I was the person that was going to direct them to do something specific for that project. And so every single time, the thing that I had to do with them was to make them feel comfortable, so that project would have been done flawlessly and in time, because we had like one person after the other. And then I did that. And then I was thinking of something, because every single time there is an experience that I do, I just think, how can I apply this to my writing? And then I realized after a few weeks, after a few months, when I created the character, I put that character in a situation similar to these people from around the world. And I would ask myself, how would this character in this situation react based on his, for example, nationality or background? So it seems like a bit weird if you think about that. There's a bit of this on Build a Better Character from Irene Cook. Like she also said, the background is so important for characters. And that was a job that taught me, yes, that actually makes sense. Like the background set up expectation from the person that you are in front of you. So yeah, I just thought, I don't know if it makes any sense to you, but really that was one of the job that really taught me a lot about character creations. I don't know if you have something similar on that side, but I really thought this question was smart and I had the answer, so I love it.
There you go. You can make friends with a curious jar. It does not bear you ill intent. The questions are neutral. I'm older than you. I've had a lot of jobs. I tended when I was younger to have multiple jobs as well at any given time. I would work evenings, weekends, all the time. I did all of the expensive education and I had to pay for that. So I have had, I think my max was about 5 jobs at the same time for a few months period while I was trying to get enough money to do my master's in Ireland. But they've been all over the map because my parents owned their own businesses always, and I often worked for them growing up. And also I just was in small towns, and so you do whatever you can in that situation to make what you need. So I have had every single role in a restaurant except hostess. I don't think I've ever officially been a hostess, but I've been a dishwasher. I worked in kitchens for years and years and years as like a line cook. I was a server in everything from a cola diner to fancy catering to bars and nightclubs. I was in management and restaurant for a little while. I have done childcare. I was a live-in nanny, a behavioral therapist, working with children with autism for a long time. I taught at the university courses on academic writing. I was a TA in psychology. I've taught workshops for kids. I have done leadership seminars all around the province with student councils and things like that. I have worked in construction sites and been a property manager of like rentals. I have done just about everything you could imagine actually at one point or another in some context or other. So I think the way that really helped with my writing is that when I'm looking at building my town of River's End and I need all the people who live there to be able to do all of these different careers, I have a bit of an inside track into what a lot of them are. And any job that I haven't had, I have a massive family. So the chances are good that one of my family members either does that job or, is married to somebody who does that job. And so between all of that, I think that's the sort of benefit to my writing, is understanding what it feels like to do those jobs. You know, I've worked in housekeeping, I've been a lifeguard, I've collected garbage from around the resort my parents own. Like there wasn't really anything glamorous about any of it. It was really just digging in and doing what you have to do to make your life work. And I think that is valuable from a personal development point of view as a writer, deciding like, I want to do this badly enough, I'm willing to do just about anything else to make it happen. And also from as you said, digging into character development and building out real people's experiences. If you have some sense of what those things feel like, it brings you a really different approach to creating those characters, and you can put a piece of yourself into that in a really authentic way. You can remember and harvest the emotions and really make that work for you. So now we want to know for you, what are, and I'm going to read this off the page again so we get it right, but we want you to go to strategicauthorpreneur.com. You can answer this question for us, whether that's on the podcast website or on YouTube or wherever you are right now. We want you to tell us, what are some of the jobs you've had while you're building your writing career, and how did they help you become the writer you are today? How are they contributing to your success as an author? So please do send us some more Curious Jar questions. The jar is running a little bit low at the moment. I mean, we're still a few. We've got a little bit of time, but we need to build up our collection. So ideas@strategicauthorpreneur.com is where those questions should go so we can answer you.
And for show notes, links to resources that we mentioned, and coupons or discount on tools we love, we invite you to visit us at strategicauthorpreneur.com. Also, subscribe to the newsletter, and each week we'll make sure to email you just one thing that we think will help you on the authorpreneur journey, and a link to our latest episode.
You'll get a gold star and 1,000,000 bonus points in the game of life if you leave us a review wherever you listen to this podcast. We love to hear what you're enjoying about the show and what you're finding helpful. So any comments you can leave will help us with that. And of course, the star ratings go a long way to helping other people find us and our show. Thanks so much for taking time out of your busy life to get to know us, and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on the next episode, where we will be taking a deep dive into the challenges and opportunities of writing short. So short stories, novellas, and novelettes, as far as length goes, will be our focus. And we are going to share all kinds of stuff that we have learned as we both have been writing fairly extensively in those short areas. Thanks so much. We'll see you next time.
See you next week. Bye-bye.
Okay. Well, let's dive in and do the first part first and the second part second, and then we'll be good.
Let's do this. I really need to cut my hair.
Yeah, you've got the Italian shirt thing going, so you can get away with that now.
Whatever you want.
Yeah, exactly. You could just always say this is Italian. This is just stylish in Italy. And we all know Italy is ahead of Canada in fashion. So you're gonna be fine no matter what. Welcome to episode 16 of this.
After 16 times, can you believe that?
After 16 times, I can't say it right. Okay.
Hello, Blue. Did you see her? She's my friend.
Yeah.
Oh, you.
That's what I spent my allowance on this week, was new highlighters in all of the colors, because I have all of these nonfiction books to read. Second I hit stop, then you say something really funny, and then I missed it. So I am just recording everything now.
Good job. You're doing it.
Like I said, I'm a teachable monkey. I was looking not at the camera because of where things were on my screen, and I talk too much with my hands or whatever. So
that's not a problem. That's a requisite.
No, I don't think that's a problem either. Clearly, I don't think that's a problem.
Okay.
what are you still doing here? Go and find your accountability buddy and start working.